We didn't kill them. The planet did. We just watched. The words echoed through the last black box transmission, soaked in static and grief. Galactic's command played it 5 times before silencing it forever. Earth was never supposed to be visited again. The Deathworlders had called themselves apex predators from across the stars, an elite extraction force from the Zelhari Dominion, born in supergravity worlds, armored by evolution. With blood that burned like acid and bones like carbon steel, they had conquered moons, eaten suns, broken civilizations, and yet only 5 made it back. Alara Kent stood at the edge of the quarantine barrier, staring into the violet-hued mists that danced across the ruins of the old Terran continent. 100 meters ahead, what had once been coastal California was now swallowed by creeping forests pulsing with phosphorescent vines and razor-leaf trees. The zone stretched for 3,000 kilometers in every direction, uncharted, uncolonized, and unmerciful. Behind Alara, the last Terran outpost hummed in low orbit. What remained of humanity watched in silence. She was the last Terran-born recon, martial, blood-bonded to Earth by birth and exile. The Zelhari called her the Warden. They didn't mean it kindly. It began 20 years ago, after the Fracture War. Earth had been used as a weapons testbed by both human rebel factions and off-worlder empires. Mutagenic payloads, bioengineered viral terrors, temporal rift bombs, all unleashed in the final weeks of the war. The atmosphere healed. The oceans adapted. But the land changed. The zone was no longer Earth. It was alive, aware, angry, and it remembered. The Dominion had never accepted human claims of quarantine protocol. They saw Earth as unclaimed territory, ripe for exploitation, so they sent their best. 2,000 of their finest Deathworld soldiers, genetically perfected and psychotically fearless, dropped into the zone like fire from heaven. That was 42 hours ago. Now only 5 signals pulse weakly at the edge of the zone, begging for extraction. Alara hadn't planned to return. She had seen what the zone had done to her brother, her friends, the city she grew up in. She had buried everything human inside her for 2 decades to survive. But they requested her, not to save the Deathworlders, but to ask why they failed. Why Earth, the so-called crippled world, had annihilated gods. She moved through the Deccan chamber, sealing her helmet. The interior interface blinked to life, neural sync calibrated, genetic lock enabled, toxin shield active. Marshal Ken came the voice of Commander Vorax, the alien strategist who had pushed hardest for the invasion. We require tactical analysis. Do not engage, observe and report only. Alara said nothing. She just walked into the light, down into the dropship. The descent was to quiet. Atmospheric interference painted crimson lightning across the horizon. Electromagnetic pulses caused the ship's controls to jitter. The pilot, an AI named Orcs, spoke through bursts of static. Landing zone compromised. Vegetation moving, hold it steady, Alara ordered. Moments later, the ship slammed into soft mud and skidded to a halt. Covered in pulsing spores and twitching branches, outside, nothing moved, but everything watched. Alara stepped out into the zone for the first time in 20 years. It felt like walking into a memory she didn't own. The terrain was a nightmare. Plants opened and hissed like breathing lungs. The ground cracked and healed behind her. Once familiar ruins of a human world peeked out between living vines. A rusted school bell, a cracked metro rail, bones half swallowed by hungry moss. She reached the first signal beacon. It was impaled through the chest of a Zelhari Titan. His armor had melted into his skin. His claws were broken. His 6 eyes were still open, wide with horror. Carved into the stone beside him, using his own blood, were 3 Terran words. It watches everything. Alara didn't flinch. She pressed deeper. At the second beacon, she found 3 more, locked in combat with each other. Their armor corrupted, their minds clearly shattered. The zone didn't kill them with beasts. It broke them with isolation, hallucinations, mirrors of their fears. She whispered under her breath, "You thought Earth was dead. You never understood what we became." She reached the final beacon near dusk. The 5 survivors huddled beneath. A collapsed satellite dish, skin burned by mutagenic spores, eyes black with trauma. They weren't warriors anymore. One lifted his trembling head. You did this," he said. "You made this place think." "No," Alara said quietly, kneeling beside him. "We are this place." The Zelhari didn't understand what Earth had become, because they couldn't imagine a world that refused to die. Their own homeworlds were brutal, Yes, high gravity, toxic storms, apex predators bred in laboratories. But they were controlled, tamed, predictable. Earth was never predictable, not after the fracture, and now it was fighting back. Alara. Ken stood over the 5 surviving Deathworlders, their once proud armor flaking with acidic corrosion. One of them, a female of unusually high rank, her glyphs marked her as Conthal, a commander of planetary sieges, tried to rise, failed, and spat blackened blood into the dirt. She pointed a shaking claw at Alara. You sent us into a trap. You knew. No. Alara replied, we warned you. You just didn't listen. The ground trembled. Not an earthquake. A breath. She activated her visor's wideband scan. It flickered with interference, but the shapes were unmistakable. Massive fungal root systems moving beneath them, heat signatures in the trees, sentient patterns emerging in cloud formations. The zone wasn't just reacting to their presence. It was studying them. 2 decades ago, during the Fracture War, the last human scientists had deployed a final failsafe, Project GAIA, Nemesis, a quantum biointelligence seeded across Earth's ecosystems. It was never meant to win. It was meant to deny victory, to make Earth uninhabitable for any invader. The system had evolved far beyond expectation. It didn't just survive. It learned. Every alien cell it touched was cataloged, countered, assimilated. The Deathworlders had landed with flame and metal. The zone responded with silence and madness. Commander Conthal muttered something in her native tongue, a curse, or maybe a prayer. Then, suddenly, she lunged at Alara with a shattered blade. Instinct kicked in. Alara twisted, drove her gauntlet under the alien's throat, and slammed her into the earth. Dirt exploded around them. The other survivors flinched, but didn't interfere. I didn't come here to kill you, Alara hissed. But if you ever touch me again, I'll let the trees do it. The Deathworlder coughed, laughing bitterly. You're not human, she rasped. Alara released her. No, not anymore. Above them, thunder crackled without clouds. In the distance, an ancient Terran comms tower burst into flame, vines constricting it like a snake crushing prey. Inside the zone, Mel had no authority. Orcs' voice broke through the comms. Marshal Ken, Zelhari High Command has ordered orbital scans and plasma cleansing. They refuse extraction. You are to abandon the survivors and return immediately. No, Alara said. You will be marked insubordinate. Good. She looked at the 5. One was already dead. Another would be by nightfall. That left 3, barely functional. But their minds might hold answers, tactical data, weaknesses, or proof that Earth didn't just repel its invaders. It converted them. As night fell, the zone came alive. Bioluminescent insects swarmed in patterns too regular to be random. Trees whispered in low-frequency hums. The mist thickened, not from temperature, but from intent. Alara pulled the survivors into a half-collapsed bunker left over from the war. Human glyphs still lined the walls. We don't die quiet. Half covered in moss. One of the Deathworlders, a lean scout named Thrux, spoke in a whisper. I saw them before we lost contact. Not creatures, not soldiers, ghosts, walking memories, human, but not. Alara stared at him. He continued. They wore old armor, eyes burning. They moved like machines, but we felt their rage. One of them, it knew my name, said my mother's name, my planet, my crimes. How she didn't answer, because she remembered the rumors. Soldiers lost in the zone returning as phantoms, not alive, not dead, just remembered too hard by the planet to let go. Later that night, the mist parted and a figure stood at the edge of the trees, humanoid, broad-shouldered, wrapped in black, bone-stitched armor that shimmered with vines and old blood. A Terran helmet, cracked, still glowed red behind the faceplate. Alara's breath caught. She knew that armor. It belonged to Idris Harlan, her brother. Dead 15 years. She took one step forward, but the figure melted back into the trees, like a memory fading. The Deathworlders cowered behind her, trembling. Conthal whispered, your ghosts fight harder than our gods. Alara gritted her teeth. She didn't know what Idris had become, but if he was still out there, part of the zone or trapped in it, she had to reach him, not just for him, but for what he might know. Because if the zone was creating echoes of the past, it might be preparing for war again. Not just defense, retaliation. Back in orbit, Zelhari warships formed firing lines. Plasma cleansing was beginning. Alara activated a hidden transponder, embedded deep in her spine, coded only to respond to one ancient human network. The AI net flickered to life in her HUD, Athena Protocol, online. A last fragment of Terran's strategic command. Old Earth hadn't died. It had waited. The stars above Earth shimmered with the silver light of impending annihilation. Zelhari cruisers aligned their plasma cores, preparing to erase the zone with surgical fury. They thought they were delivering justice. They had no idea they were about to start a war they couldn't understand. Alara Ken knelt in the bunker, hand pressed against the old command relay. Dust and vines flaked off as her neural sync interfaced with the Athena Protocol, the buried intelligence network of Earth's final generation. Athena's voice whispered directly into her skull. You've returned, Alara Ken. Your DNA key confirms last recorded presence, 19 years, 227 days ago. Command link reestablished. Initiating battlefield sync. Alara swallowed. How much do you remember? All of it. The betrayals, the exiles, the silence. Are we at war again? She looked back at the Deathworlders huddled in the dark. We never stopped. Outside, the zone stirred. Trees tilted toward the sky like antennae. Funnel caps pulsed in time with distant thunder. The mist thickened, forming the outline of giants. Vague humanoid shapes stitched from light and memory. Thrux, the scout, pointed with trembling claws. They're watching. Why don't they attack? They're learning, Alara said. We used to call it adaptive pressure. You hit Earth with something once, it doesn't work again. The zone's doing the same. You died because you taught it how. Conthal grunted. We didn't come to teach. We came to conquer. Alara's voice turned to steel. And now you're the lesson. In orbit. Commander Vorax's command. Ship locked onto the zone's heat signatures. Coordinates verified. Firing path clear. But just before launch, something disrupted the feed. A pulse of M radiation. Not from the ground, but within their own targeting relays. Glitches. Static. Then, silence. Every Dominion ship's interface lit up with a symbol they didn't recognize. But Alara did. The old Terran sigil for resistance. A broken sword, point down, in a burning ring. The zone had hacked them. Back on the ground, Alara activated Athena's deeper archives. Holograms blinked into life across the bunker. Old war plans. Forgotten weapon caches, orbital failsafes, and ghost uni positions. Then she found it. It reads Harlan's status, unknown, recoverable. Last seen in a sector marked redacted. But it wasn't redacted anymore. Athena had cleared the lock, and beside it, a name, Archive Omega. Her brother had gone into the Earth's deepest bunker, the cradle of the Nemesis seed. If he survived, if he merged with it, he wasn't just part of the zone. He was the zone. She turned to the survivors. There's a place I have to go, deep in the zone. If Idris is still there, he can tell us how to survive, how to stop this war. You'll die, Thrux said. We all will. No, Alara said, her voice low but unshakable. You will come with me, or you'll die here alone. Conthal snarled. You ask us to follow you into madness, into the lair of ghosts and poisoned air. No, Alara said again. I ask you to witness. Then, for the first time, she opened her armor, just enough to reveal the branded sigil across her chest. A Terran resistance mark, burned, into flesh, an oath. Conthal looked at it, and for the first time, her hatred gave way to something else, respect. They moved through the ruins the next morning. Athena guided them, not by path, but by memory. The trees opened for Alara, the ground pulsed gently beneath her boots, leading her through broken war zones where rusted mechs slumped against buildings like dying giants. Children's toys littered the mud, human bones whispered warnings from collapsed shelters. And then, near dusk, they found it, a cratered field, 12 kilometers wide, black glass fused with bone. In the center stood a monolith, surrounded by a ring of old Terran tanks, frozen mid-fire. Each had been overtaken by vines and moss. There, barrels pointed toward a central stone shaped like a spearhead driven into the planet itself. Archive Omega. Alara stepped forward. The monolith pulsed with an inner light, red, then gold, then something deeper. Symbols lit its surface, not alien glyphs, but old human languages, Latin, Cyrillic, Urdu, Chinese, Yoruba, Earth's voice. She placed her palm on it. Welcome back, Warden Ken. One survivor remains. He waits. A doorway split open, mist bled from the crack, and beyond it, a long hallway descending into the core of the world. Conthal held her breath. You want to go down there? Yes. Alone? No, Alara said, turning. She handed Conthal her sidearm. Now you decide. You came to destroy Earth. Now you get to choose if you help save it. Behind them, the zone screamed. Zelhari orbital ships had reinitialized their strike. Fire rained from the sky, but it was deflected, their beams twisted, scattered by atmospheric pulses. A barrier had formed, not of shields, but of the planet's will. The zone had chosen sides, and it remembered who protected it. As Alara and the survivors descended into Archive Omega, she whispered a promise under her breath to the five. Who lived, you'll see why no one should ever come here again. Earth did not forgive. Earth evolved, and in the heart of Archive Omega, it was waiting to be remembered. Alara Ken descended the obsidian corridor with 3 Deathworlders at her back, each one silent now, not from fear, but reverence. There was something sacred here, something older than war. The further they moved into the arc, the more the atmosphere changed. The air shimmered like liquid memory. Gravity pulsed irregularly. Time stretched and folded in the corners of vision. The zone wasn't just a battleground. It was a vault of pain, defiance, and survival, and buried within it was Idris Harlan. Thrux stumbled. Conthal caught him by the arm, a gesture unthinkable days ago. The acid-blooded elite, once bred to conquer, now supported a limping comrade with gentleness. Even the Deathworlders had changed. Even they could feel it. You smell it, Thrux whispered. Alara nodded. Yes, ash and old thunder. It was the smell of endings. They reached the central chamber. A throne of roots and rusted steel rose from a pool of black glass. Upon it sat a man, or what had once been one, Idris, or the thing that bore his face. Vines wrapped through the seams of his armor. His eyes glowed faintly, flickering between recognition and something far older. Not madness, merging. Alara, he said, voice like gravel dragged through static. You came back. I never wanted to, she replied. But they did. She gestured to the Deathworlders, and they brought war again. Idris stood slowly. Every movement sent tremors through the ground. The zone responded like a creature shifting in its sleep. They never learned. No, Alara said, but maybe now they will. Idris turned to the Deathworlders. His voice thundered without sound. You thought you knew war. You thought Earth was a corpse to plunder, but we buried our dead standing, and we taught the dirt to remember. Conthal stepped forward, hands unclenched. We were wrong. Idris tilted his head. You invaded the cradle of extinction, and you survived. That makes you dangerous. She lowered her head. We were told this was a world of ghosts. Instead, we found a god. No, Alara said sharply, no gods. Just us. Just the broken things that refuse to stay down. Suddenly, pain lanced through Alara's skull. Athena's voice flared in her mind. Emergency. Orbital bombardment accelerating. Zelhari fleets no longer seeking precision. Global strike imminent. Alara staggered. They're going full saturation. Let them come, Idris said. Let them burn the sky. No. Alara grabbed his arm. That's not what we do. We don't win by becoming like them. Idris looked at her, and for the first time, the light behind his eyes dimmed. Human again, if only for a moment. He turned to the core behind the throne, a glowing sphere humming with unspent energy. The zone is connected. Every tree, every spore, every echo of who we were. It can reach out. Reach where? Asked Conthal. Everywhere. Alara stared at the core, a planetary neural web, an ancient AI, mutagenic soil, bioconductive atmosphere. Idris, what are you saying? I'm saying, he said, slowly, we can send a message. Not words, not logic, but feeling, memory, truth. The Deathworlders thought Earth was weak, so it showed them strength. Now it could show them everything else. Above, the Zelhari, or fleet charged its final volley. Plasma cores reached critical ignition. Athena's countdown began. Strike impact, T-minus 3 minutes. Orbital override impossible. Idris stepped into the core. Vines wrapped around him. He didn't resist. Alara, he said, you once said humanity had no legacy left. I was wrong, she whispered. Then help me remind them. She placed her hand beside his on the core. Her mind fractured, 1,000 memories detonating inside her. The birth of the zone, the agony of Earth's last stand, the children hiding under irradiated schools, The final laugh of soldiers knowing they'd already won by refusing to kneel. She let it all go and broadcasted. The stars ripple, and every Zelhari ship systems failed. Holograms bloomed across their decks, human faces, unknown and unflinching, smiling, crying, bleeding. Every crew member felt it, the heartbreak of Earth, the fury, the love, the undying refusal to be erased. Some wept, others screamed. A few knelt in silent awe. Commander Vorax, once unmoved by death, now trembled before the onslaught of something far worse, empathy. They are not a species, he whispered. They are a memory that fights back in the archive. The core flared one final time. Idris collapsed. The zone went still. The trees stopped whispering. The sky returned to blue, and Athena said only, "Transmission complete." Alara fell to her knees beside her brother. He was still breathing, but faintly. "You showed them," she said. He looked up at her with tired eyes. "They'll still come, I know." She stood, shoulders straight. "Then we make sure they never forget what happens when you come to Earth." Above Earth, the Zelhari fleet held fire, not from fear of weapons, but from the weight of what they'd seen. Commanders sat frozen. Crews whispered. War beasts bred without remorse shivered beneath their armor, haunted by images they couldn't erase. Mothers cradling dying children under collapsed cities. Defiant Terran soldiers laughing as extinction swallowed them. The whisper of one final vow. "We were born from the ashes. You don't know what that makes us." No one moved. And then, the message changed everything. On the Dominion command deck, a transmission arrived. It wasn't from Earth. It was from within their own fleet. A Zelhari captain, Commander Axion, survivor of the first drop, activated a broadwave. He stood bareheaded, armor-scorched, one eye burned blind. Behind him were 5 of his squad, the only ones who made it back from the surface. Pale, gaunt, changed. He addressed his own empire. "You sent us to prove superiority. We returned, broken, not by weapons, not by beasts, but by a world that refuses to die and makes you feel what that means." Gasps. Some snarled in disgust. Axion continued. "You call them primitive, but they burned their gods long ago. They made a graveyard of their home and taught it to fight in their name. I do not fight this world again. I pledge to it." He dropped to one knee. The others followed. "This is my submission, not to Earth, but to the truth." The fleet fractured within moments. Some ships powered down. Others turned their guns inward. Commanders demanding silence. Onboard skirmishes erupted. Zelhari soldiers loyal to conquest clashed with those changed by Earth's broadcast. Rebellion brewed not with slogans, but with memory. The Deathworlders were no longer unified, and Earth had done it with nothing but a story. In the archive, Idris Harlan was dying. His veins were laced with mutagenic spores, the price of communion with the zone's core. Alara held his hand, trembling. "You don't come back from this," she whispered. "I was never meant to." Idris rasped. "The seed needed a shepherd. I gave it my name." His eyes burned brighter for one final moment. "I saw what they did to us, to you. I became what they feared, so you wouldn't have to." Tears welled in her eyes. "They're afraid now, but they're not done." "No," he agreed, "which is why you have to finish it." He reached into the moss beneath his throne, pulling out a silver capsule, its edges sharp, its glow unmistakably Terran. The last known Echo Core, a fragment of old Earth's orbital AI defense system. Dormant since the fracture, with it, Earth could do more than remember. It could strike back. Alara turned to the others. Conthal stepped forward first. "What is that?" "A key," Alara said. "To the old satellites. Defense rings. Automated carriers orbiting in silent blackout. It's not just the zone that's watching. Then what will you do with it?" Alara looked to the sky. Where Zelhari's ship still shimmered in uneasy silence. "Give them a choice." Athena activated the launch pod. A tunnel opened above them, revealing the night sky. The stars blinked, distant and uncaring, except for one. One wasn't a star. One was moving. A shape emerged from the darkness, vast, angular, silent. Revenant Station, Earth's last unlaunched orbital platform. Buried in stealth, untouched since the fall. The Echo Core pinged. Revenant responded. Alara linked her neural feed to the station. Old files blinked delightful flight paths, orbital strike queues, defensive asset networks. Power hummed. Guns began to turn. The zone's intelligence fed. directly into the station's core. The ghost of Earth now had a voice again, a voice made of cannon fire and iron memory. She broadcast one final message to the Zelhari Dominion. Her voice was clear, unapologetic. You came to take, you came to erase. We showed you who we are. Now you choose, leave, and remember us, or stay, and become a chapter in our necks. Warning. There was no bluff in her voice, only a terrible truth. Earth had rearmed itself, and it remembered how to end wars. On board the Zelhari flagship, Commander Vorak stood frozen, face pale. He had seen Earth broken once. During the fracture, he had laughed when humans fell apart. But now, they had rebuilt, in silence, beneath poison skies, inside the soil, inside themselves. This wasn't a resistance. This was resurgence. Conthal stood beside Alara, watching the stars. They will run. Some will. Alara said. Some won't. Then what will you do? Alara's eyes narrowed. Finish what we started. Behind her, Idris whispered his last breath. Show them why we were feared. His hand fell limp. The zone pulsed, then went still, as if mourning its chosen son, but not defeated. Awakened, the Zelhari fleet fractured at dawn. Half their ships turned away. The rest stayed, not out of courage, but defiance. They would erase the planet, not for conquest, but for pride. Pride, Alara Ken knew, was how empires died. High above, Revenant Station drifted into visible orbit. It had no crew. It had no mercy. Only directives buried deep in its heart. Protect Earth. Remember the dead. Erase the invader. Its railguns rotated silently, each cannon marked with the names of Terran cities long gone. New Cairo, Rio 9, Vasa Cradle. Alara stood beneath the shattered sky, watching streaks of fire burn across the horizon. Dropships, war cruisers, the final arm of a dying empire. Behind her, the Deathworlders waited. Trucks trembled, not from fear, but awe. They still come. Conthal's voice was quiet. Then let them die in history's shadow. Athena spoke in Alara's mind, cold and steady. Orbital lock engaged. Target clusters, 17. Estimated survival probability, 12.6% without. Intervention, Alara exhaled slowly, and with intervention, 14.9%. If you go up there, still bad odds, but better. She turned to Conthal. You said your people admired strength. That true victory was not conquest, but endurance. Conthal nodded. That was before we met a world that outlived its own. Death. Alara held out the echo core. You can leave now, or you can help me end this, for real. Conthal took the core without hesitation. I came here a soldier. I leave as a witness. Show me what humans call justice. They ascended in a retrofitted Terran launch pod buried beneath the archive. The old tech groaned under pressure, but still obeyed. It remembered her. As they broke atmosphere, the view widened. Earth was no longer blue. It was streaked in green and silver, wrapped in clouds like scars. It looked both ancient and vengeful, like a world that had nothing left to lose. Revenant Station docked them. In silence, the interior was dark, untouched since the fracture war. Panels flickered as Alara walked its spine, recognizing Carter's by instinct. Ghosts whispered from walls. Her fingers brushed dried blood at the bulkhead. Memories returned uninvited. The last time she was here, she'd held a dying medic in her arms. He'd smiled as the orbital flames took the sky. At least we were alive when it mattered. He'd said. She hadn't cried then, but now she did. Athena greeted her within the command nexus. Final override confirmed. Would you like to speak before engagement? Alara looked through the viewport. The Zelhari flagship was charging its core, a weapon that could turn oceans to vapor. She activated the comms. This is Alara Ken, last daughter of Earth. You came here thinking we were broken. You were right. You came thinking we were alone. You were wrong. You thought memory was weakness. But it is the strongest weapon we have. We remember everything. We remember your bombs, your lies, your silence. But we also remember holding the line on burning bridges. We remember starving so the children could eat. We remember burying the dead with no time to grieve and still standing. You cannot conquer a planet that's already mourned itself. You cannot erase us. Because we already endured extinction, and we endured it together. Her hand hovered over the final command. So this is not vengeance. It's proof that we are still here, and if you want the rest of the stars, you'll go through us. She pressed the trigger. Revenant roared. Kinetic lances lit the void, carving through Zelhari ships like knives through water. Electromagnetic shockwaves. Fry guidance systems. Drones launched in silent fury, each a flying tomb of Terran will. The flagship shuddered, retaliated, a full plasma salvo, but Earth's atmosphere surged upward with 1,000 microshield distortions blooming from the zone itself. The planet protected her children. On the station, a breach tore through the lower deck. Conthal caught Alara mid-fall, her clawed hand slamming into the wall for balance. "You fight like no other species," she gasped. "You bleed into the stars." "We were never meant to conquer them," Alara said, "only to make sure no one else does this to us again." In space, the Zelhari forces buckled. Ships turned. Some exploded mid-escape. Others drifted dead in orbit, their captains finally understanding what they'd stepped into. Earth wasn't a planet. It was a warning. ADHENA's voice returned. Orbital threat reduced to 8%. Fleeing vectors observed. Request. Final broadcast. Alara, bloodied but breathing, nodded. She leaned into the mic. "To those who stayed and listened, thank you. To those who fled, remember what you saw. And to those who'll come next," she stared down at her wounded world. "Know this, we are still here, and now, we are not just human, we are the memory of fire." Revenant Station went dark, but the message had been sent. The war was not over, but it would never be the same again. It began with silence, not the silence of peace, the silence that follows a reckoning. The Zelhari warfleet lay broken across the void, their finest ships drifting in orbital decay. Systems scorched, crews speechless, some vessels turned homeward. Without orders, others floated like tombs, their captains having chosen fire over surrender. And still, Earth burned quietly below, not in defeat, but in vigilance. In the control chamber of Revenant Station, Alara Kent stood bloodied, hands trembling, watching it all unfold. The war hadn't ended with cheers. No banners, no music, only a world that refused to kneel. "Athena," she whispered, "status. Hostile fleet, 73% neutralized, remaining vessels in full retreat or distress. No further immediate orbital threat detected. Global zone harmonics stabilizing. Earth is watching." Alara's eyes drifted toward the planet, scars of war glowing faintly beneath the clouds. So many years of pain, so many names lost. "Then we're not done." In the shadows of the command deck, Conthal approached. Her Zelhari armor, cracked, stained with Terran dust, seemed a relic now, unfit for the warrior within. "You could have destroyed them all," she said. "Why didn't you?" Alara didn't turn. "Because this isn't about extinction. That's their way, not ours. You showed mercy?" "No," she said softly. "I showed them truth." Suddenly, Athena's systems flared. Not alarms, not warnings. An incoming signal, encrypted, ancient, and unmistakably Terran. Origin, deep system. Relay echoes through forgotten beacon nodes. Source, Sol Vector Redline. Classification, Arc-9. Double quotes. Alara froze. She knew that designation, Arc-9, was the final fallback archive. The place where old Earth's last leaders stored the species' future, not in weapons, but in knowledge, a transmission that had never been answered until now. A face bloomed on the screen, wrinkled, human, weathered by decades of isolation. The eyes behind the face were tired, but they sparked with the fire of knowing too much for too long. "Alara Ken," the man said. "You've woken up the stars." She stared, stunned. "Who are you?" "My name's Harlan, not Idris. My name is Victor Harlan." "Your father." The room tilted. Alara's breath caught. "Impossible." "No," he said. "Only inconvenient." He explained quickly. In the final hours of the Fracture War, Victor had volunteered for cryodispersal, one of 9 scientists launched to the edges of the system to preserve Earth's legacy. In case the planet fell, everyone believed they died. But ARK-9 survived, hidden in the Orc shadows. It watched Earth fade, and now watched it rise. "You sent a signal," he said. "The zone's awakening. Revenant Station, we saw the light." He leaned closer. "Alara, you've done what no one else could." She felt her heart pound. "I didn't save the world." "No," Victor said. "But you reminded it how to fight." Alara turned to Athena. "Connect him to the zone's neural web. Let the planet feel what he knows." The system obeyed. Earth pulsed brighter below. The zone absorbed it all. His memories, coordinates, Survival data, blueprints, warnings. The roots deepened, the air thickened, the soil learned. A dying species had become a living library, but the moment was shattered by a final, brutal sound, a shriek from the dark side of Earth. ATHENA's warning blared. New contact. Class null. Vessel breaching system edge. Zelhari origin, but corrupted, not standard Dominion pattern. Konthal's eyes widened. No, it can't be. What is it? Alara asked. She answered with a whisper. The Harrower. A myth. A punishment ship. Forbidden in Dominion law. Said to be seeded with extinct technologies from lost wars. Machines of flesh, void beasts in metal skin, guided by tortured minds. Designed not to conquer, but to erase, it moved toward Earth without slowing, faster than light, burning through space like a spear. Behind it, fragments of dead moons drifted like shrapnel. They sent it, Konthal said, her voice breaking. Because they couldn't accept defeat. They wanted to make an example, Alara growled. Of us? No, Konthal said, stepping forward. Of me, of any Zelhari who knelt to your truth. Alara clenched her fists. Then we send a message back. She turned to Athena. Is the Arc beacon relay still online? Yes. Functional. Then connect me to every ship, every orbit, every survivor. Make them see. She walked to the command dais, blood on her face, fire in her chest. This is Alara Ken of Earth. The Zelhari Harrower approaches, not as a victor, but as a coward's final scream. To all who hear this, you are not alone. The stars watch, and so do we. Humanity is no longer hiding. We remember every wound. We carry every ghost. And today, we remind the galaxy why we were feared, why we were exiled, why we should have been left alone. The Harrower screamed into range. Revenant Station shifted. Its orbit pulled low. Kinetic cannons heated. But even that wouldn't be enough. So Alara did the unthinkable. She opened the zone. Across Earth, the soil ruptured. The trees ignited, not in flame, but light. Pillars of energy, pure and ancient, shot skyward from key biocores hidden since the Fracture War. They formed a lattice, a neural halo, connecting Revenant to the living Earth below. Athena spoke, awed, planetary defense sync complete. Alara gave one command. Burn it. The final battle had begun. A broken world, a dead station, a girl who had nothing left, and a ship that thought it could erase them. The Harrower died screaming. It didn't explode. It dissolved piece by cursed piece, unmade by the wrath of a world that refused to die. The neural lattice from Earth wrapped around it like a new spun from memory and pain. Revenant Station fired its final payload, not of weapons, but of data. Old Terran command codes feeding into the abomination's ancient systems. It was not destroyed. It was reminded of fire, of loss, of Earth, and that was enough to break it. When the dust settled, there was no victory chant, no flag raised, just silence, and then wind, and then rain, real rain. Not poisoned by chemical ash or plasma clouds Earth exhaled. It wasn't whole, but it was alive. Alara Ken stood atop Revenant Station's exterior hull, maglocked, in place, staring down at the blue-green planet below. The final transmission from Arc 9 had gone out hours ago. A beacon flare that reached past the Ort line, lighting up the old Terranway stations like torches. Humanity's scattered children, the ones who had run before the collapse, would hear it. Earth was awake, and she was calling them home. Konthal stood beside her. Her Zelhari sigils had been burned off, replaced with a crude symbol. Scraped into her armor, a sword broken in half, tip buried in a ring of flame. The Terran mark of survival. We've won, Konthal said quietly. No, Alara replied. We reminded the galaxy who we are. That's not the same. And what comes next? Alara closed her eyes. They'll come, she whispered. The curious, the defiant, the scared, the hopeful. Some to kill, some to kneel, some just to see if the stories were true. She looked at the stars, and will be ready. Down on the planet's surface, the zone pulsed gently. Idris Harlan's body had become part of it now. His DNA, his memories, his voice, woven into the planet's consciousness. Children, someday, would sit near the roots and swear they heard him humming in the wind. He was never buried. He was planted. Athena had changed, too. Her voice, no longer cold. Now she whispered with warmth, as if touched by Alara's emotions, by human grief, by their endless, messy love for one another, all systems nominal. Remaining orbital assets secure, planetary harmony at 87% restoration, atmospheric purity returning, Earth is healing. Alara stepped into the command chamber one last time. There, on the console, sat the Echo Core, cracked, spent, but still glowing faintly. A relic of a species that had once stood on the edge and refused to fall. She recorded one final message. It would beam outward across the galaxy to every species watching. A warning, a memory, a promise to those who listen and those who do not. This is Earth. We were broken, but never beaten. You tried to erase us, but we became the dust in your lungs, the grit in your teeth, the nightmares in your sky. You feared us because you could never control us. Now, you remember why. We are not your enemy, but we are not your prey. We are the ghost in the machine, the fire in the soil, the species that crawled from the dirt, burned its gods, and taught itself to love in spite of everything. This is your last warning. Do not return here in conquest. Return only if you're ready to understand who we became, because now the stars carry our name, and Earth remembers. The message echoed through the system for decades. Some dismissed it as myth, others whispered it like scripture. A few marked their ships with a broken sword, not out of loyalty, but respect. Entire empires rewrote their invasion protocols to avoid one blue planet on the edge of a spiral. Armed, and on Earth, survivors began rebuilding. Not skyscrapers, not armies, communities. They planted gardens where bunkers once stood, painted murals of Idris on shattered walls. Lit fires not to survive, but to gather. One day, a ship arrived, old, rusted, human, from Mars Exile 7, long thought lost. A girl stepped out. Wide-eyed, dusty, she looked at Alara with wonder. This is Earth? Alara smiled. No, she said, this is home. Far beneath their feet, the zone slept. But it dreamed now, not of vengeance, of birth. Because for the first time in 100 years, Earth had a future again.